What would you do if your mother-in-law held your newborn before you did? While I lay unconscious in a recovery room, stitched shut from my C-section, my daughter was being cradled in someone else's arms. Not a nurse, not her father, my mother-in-law, Margaret. The nurse told me she had insisted on some bonding time, smiled as if it were a kindness, like it was normal, like she hadn't stolen a moment that would never return. I didn't scream, I didn't cry. I asked for my daughter and thanked them when they handed her back. But something shifted in me that day, not broken, not shattered, just sharpened, quieter. Margaret called it love, I called it theft, and from that moment on, I decided she would never touch my child again, not ever. My name is Evelyn Hart. Before I ever became a mother, I lived in a world of pages and paint. I was an illustrator by trade, a curator before that, but always someone who found comfort in quiet things. I married Adam because he made silence feel safe. Our life in the city was small and bright, filled with bookstore Saturdays and long Sunday walks. I never imagined giving it up. But when I got pregnant after 2 failed rounds of IVF, we moved closer to his mother in Connecticut. It was supposed to be temporary, a place to settle while we figured things out. A gentle place to raise a child. Margaret's house was anything but gentle. It was grand and cold, a place where things were placed, not lived in. She greeted me the day we arrived with a kiss on the cheek and a comment about my hips. Said I'd carry well, like the Caldwells always had. She spoke as if I was a vessel for something more important than myself, legacy, bloodline, the right kind of child. She never raised her voice. She didn't need to. Her power was in the pause after a compliment, in the small corrections slipped into conversation, in the way she gave me a pair of gloves and said they were her mother's, because now I was part of the lineage. At first, I tried to win her over. I invited her to a sonogram, which she later described as disturbing but necessary. I included her in nursery decisions until she redesigned the entire room without asking, choosing shades of pale lavender I never picked. When I tried to reclaim space, she would smile and say, "You're overwhelmed, dear. Let me help." It was hard to argue with someone who looked like they were helping. Adam didn't see it, not then. To him, she was traditional, involved, a little much maybe, but well-meaning. He loved her in the way boys do when their mothers hold their history too tightly. I didn't push back. I didn't want to be the wife who pulled him from his family, so I bent. Gave a little here, a little there. By the 3rd trimester, Margaret had a bassinet in her bedroom, just in case. She said it like a joke, but she meant it. I knew she did. I remember running my hands over my stomach one night and whispering, "You're mine. Just mine." And still, somehow, part of me already felt like I was losing her. The hospital room was still and white, humming faintly with machines. I remember the blur of voices before the anesthesia pulled me under. Adam kissed my forehead. A nurse adjusted the IV. The last thing I saw was the overhead light tilting, then nothing. When I came to, the room was dim. My mouth was dry, and my body ached in places I didn't yet understand. I blinked at the bassinet beside me. Empty. I asked for my baby. The nurse smiled kindly and said, "Oh, she's with your mother-in-law. She wanted a little bonding time. She said you agreed before surgery." The words didn't land right. I hadn't agreed to anything. No one had asked me. My chest tightened. Panic sat just beneath my skin, but I couldn't move. I could barely lift my head. I asked again, voice weaker than I meant it to be. The nurse assured me they'd be right back. 10 minutes passed, then 20. Finally, the door opened. Margaret walked in, cradling my daughter in her arms like a prize. She was swaddled in a blanket I didn't recognize, one Margaret must have brought from home. Her voice was gentle, her tone maternal. "She's perfect," she said. I sang to her. "She's so calm in my arms." I reached out, and Margaret hesitated, just for a second. Then she handed her over with a smile that never quite reached her eyes. Adam appeared in the doorway behind her, holding coffee, oblivious. He said Margaret had been waiting in the hallway and the nurses had told him she could go in. He thought I knew. He thought it was fine. Later, when I asked another nurse about the moment I was unconscious, she looked confused. She said Margaret was firm, said she had power of attorney, that I had signed papers. That wasn't true. Margaret had lied. She had walked into a hospital room, seen a sedated woman, and decided that whatever happened next was hers to shape. That night, I stared at my daughter for hours. I tried to imagine her first breath, her first cry, the sound she made when she was lifted into the air. I hadn't been there for any of it. Margaret had. I didn't scream. I didn't accuse. I simply held my daughter and whispered her name over and over, like I was anchoring her to me. Because in that moment, I realized I wasn't just recovering from surgery, I was recovering from something deeper. I had been invaded. And Margaret didn't even know she had started a war. After we brought our daughter home, I moved through the days like someone underwater. I fed her, I held her. I watched her chest rise and fall with each breath, but something in me had changed. Not broken, refined, cold glass, once soft, now hardened at the edges. Margaret visited often, always with gifts, a silver rattle engraved with her initials, a onesie that said, "Grandma's Girl." She insisted on bath time demonstrations, corrected my swaddling technique, critiqued the temperature of her bottles. When I spoke, she interrupted. When I didn't, she filled the silence with rules. I said nothing. Instead, I started documenting, quietly. I bought a second phone and used it to record voice memos. Little moments. Margaret insisting the baby smiled more when she held her. Margaret whispering that post-C-section hormones made me sensitive. Margaret suggesting I take a nap while she took the baby to the park. I never let her, but she kept trying. Adam stayed neutral, kind but distant. He was navigating fatherhood, work, and the invisible line between his wife and his mother. He thought the tension would pass. I knew better. I reached out to someone I hadn't spoken to in years, Sasha Reed. We were roommates in college, both of us drawn to quiet corners and long conversations. Now she was a family lawyer working in Boston. I didn't tell her everything, not at first. I asked questions, casual things, grandparent rights, medical authority, what constitutes psychological overreach. She listened carefully, then asked if I was safe. I told her I was, for now. At night, while Adam slept, I worked on a children's book, just for my daughter. It was hand-illustrated, tender, filled with soft colors and quiet strength. The main character was a little girl born in a snowstorm who fought to find her name. A name stolen, then reclaimed. I named her Isla, not the name Margaret had monogrammed on blankets. Not the name she had written in gold on the christening invitation she had drafted without asking. Isla, my name for her. Before I finished the second draft, I filed for copyright, under my name, as sole author and illustrator. Sasha helped me walk through the process, reviewed the documents, everything was airtight. No one knew. Not Margaret, not Adam. Because revenge, the kind that leaves a mark, is never loud. It waits, it gathers, and then, when the moment is right, it steps into the light with receipts. Margaret thought I was fragile. She had no idea I was just getting quiet so she couldn't hear me sharpen the knife. Margaret always needed a stage. She couldn't simply love, she had to be seen loving. So when she announced she was planning a naming ceremony for our daughter, I wasn't surprised. She called it a family tradition, said it was how Caldwells had always welcomed their next generation. She never asked for permission. She sent out printed invitations, gold-trimmed and embossed, naming the event Isadora Evelyn Caldwell's formal introduction. That wasn't my daughter's name. She never had been. Margaret had decided that for herself. The ceremony would be held at her estate, under the large oak tree where she claimed generations had gathered. A string quartet was booked, a catering team confirmed. I watched the pieces move without lifting a finger to stop them. Let her build her moment, let her climb the pedestal. I was already at work underneath it, pulling out the foundation. With Sasha's help, I filed for a temporary restraining order based on documented psychological manipulation. We included the hospital incident, the nurse's testimony, even a copy of the voice memos. I submitted my copyright registration for the book, which included my daughter's name, Isla Madeline Hart, and a notarized birth certificate amendment request. Every piece fit, every part was clean. Sasha was surgical, calm, unshakable. She said Margaret had made a crucial mistake by going public. She had made her interference visible, traceable, arrogant. The invitations, the monogrammed items, the photos of her holding my daughter with captions like 3 generations of Caldwell women, they all became evidence. A week before the ceremony, I visited the estate. I walked through the garden where Margaret was placing floral arrangements. She spoke of legacy, of pride, of how this child had saved the family's name. I smiled and told her I looked forward to the event, then I walked away. The night before, I finished binding the first limited copy of my illustrated book, the story of a girl who lost her name and the mother who painted it back onto her soul. I wrapped it in soft paper and tucked it into a white box. The next day, guests arrived. The string quartet played. Champagne was poured. Margaret stood tall beside the embroidered family crest, her smile wide and fixed. And then, a courier approached her, a sealed envelope in hand. Inside, she found a formal cease and desist, a restraining order request, a copyright notification, and a legal petition for sole naming rights and medical authority over my daughter. Margaret looked up, eyes scanning the crowd. She realized, too late, the ceremony wasn't hers. It was mine, and it had just begun. The silence hit first, a dense, thick quiet that rippled through the garden as Margaret opened the envelope. Her hand trembled, just slightly, not enough for most people to notice, but I saw it. Guests sipped from their glasses, smiling politely, unaware of the shift. The string quartet faltered for half a note, then resumed. Margaret blinked at the pages, her smile faltering as she read the court language. Cease and desist, unauthorized use of name, protective order, attached documentation. She looked around for Adam, for control, for some ground beneath her feet. Adam was already walking toward her. He'd received his own envelope 20 minutes earlier. I had handed it to him myself. He didn't say a word to his mother. Not yet. He just stood beside her reading, slowly, carefully. His face grew pale, the kind of color that only comes when something true rearranges what you thought you knew. Margaret tried to speak. "This is absurd," she said. "It's a misunderstanding. Evelyn has been unstable since the birth. We all know that." I stepped forward, calm, unshaking. "There was no misunderstanding," I said. "You removed my daughter from a hospital room without consent. You claimed I had given you permission while I was under anesthesia. You lied. And since that day, you have continued to erase me from my child's life." Her mouth opened, closed. Guests leaned in slightly. Conversations stalled. "I have audio. I have nurse statements. I have a legal record of you referring to my daughter as your child in emails. And I have copyright ownership of her name, her story, and her likeness. The law sees me now. You will too." Margaret's voice broke into a brittle whisper. "You don't understand legacy. You don't understand what it means to carry a family." Adam turned to her. "I think she understands it better than you ever did," he said. That's when Margaret began to unravel, not loudly, not theatrically, just piece by piece. She reached for Adam's hand. He didn't take it. She said my name, softer this time, almost pleading. But I saw the truth behind her eyes. Not remorse, Fear, loss of control. I handed her the white box. "This is the book I wrote for Isla," I said, "the one you tried to rename. Page 13 shows her wrapped in the same blanket you brought to the hospital, but in this version, the villain doesn't win." She didn't open the box. I walked away first. Adam followed. We didn't need to shout, we didn't need to stay. Behind us, Margaret stood alone in a garden full of strangers, holding a paper she didn't write and a child she no longer had any claim to. The stage she built for herself had become a courtroom, the ceremony a reckoning, and her crown had turned to ash right in her hands. The days that followed unfolded like a quiet dismantling. Margaret did not call, she did not visit, she did not show up at the courthouse hearing, even though her lawyer appeared in her place. The judge read through the evidence without interruption. Audio clips, hospital records, the copyright filings. The restraining order was granted without objection. Her silence wasn't surrender, it was preservation. She had built a life on the illusion of grace. Now exposed, she had nowhere to perform. Within weeks, word spread through her community. The invitations she had sent out had named a child who legally no longer existed. Isadora Evelyn Caldwell never lived. The woman who had tried to name her into existence had been legally barred from using that name again. At church, she stopped being seated in the front row. The women she once organized charity events with stopped calling. Neighbors who once described her as refined began to use words like calculated, isolated, dangerous. Adam changed, slowly at first. The distance between us began to shrink. He started asking questions about his childhood, things he had never considered before. How his mother had handled his father's death, how she had controlled the narrative, how she had edited people from their own memories. He started seeing a therapist. He started sitting beside me more often without his phone in his hand. We moved within 2 months. A smaller house, farther from the estate, closer to the city, a place with peeling paint and wide windows, a place we could make ours from the ground up. Adam never said he was sorry with words. He said it by repainting the nursery walls in colors I chose. He said it by learning how to cook breakfast while I slept. He said it by reading our daughter the book I wrote, his voice thick at page 13 every time. Margaret sent one letter, not to me, to Adam, folded neatly in a cream envelope, unsigned. She asked if she could send a gift for Christmas. He left it on the counter, never opened it. The day it snowed, we lit a fire and held our daughter between us, her fingers curled around a wooden toy Adam had carved. Outside, the trees bent under the weight of white. The woman who once claimed her would never know her laugh, never see the curl of her hair damp from bathwater, never hear her say mama for the first time. Margaret had tried to rewrite our story, but I held the pen now. Spring came gently that year, the kind of soft, hesitant warmth that feels like a second chance. Our new house had a small garden out back, nothing special, but enough. Adam turned the soil one morning while I sat nearby, Isla asleep in my arms. He was quiet, focused, the way he always got when building something with his hands. We planted roses along the edge of the fence, not because Margaret had loved them, because I did, because I wanted Isla to grow up around things that were chosen, not inherited. Inside, her nursery was no longer lavender. I had painted it a soft green with hand-drawn animals along the border. Each one had a name, each one had a story. Above her crib hung a single frame, a photo of the first time I held her, my face pale and tired, but mine, fully, irrevocably mine. The book sat beside it on the shelf, the first copy of The Day I Met My Mother. I had signed it in ink that shimmered faintly under sunlight. Just beneath the title, it read, "To Isla, whose name was never up for discussion." She would never meet Margaret, not because I kept her away out of spite, but because I wanted her to know peace before performance, love before legacy, truth before tradition. Sometimes, when the wind moved just right, I imagined Margaret alone in that estate, walking past empty rooms filled with portraits of a family she once controlled. Her house had always echoed. Now it was silent. She had taken what wasn't hers, and in trying to claim it, she lost everything that was. I didn't need revenge and flames. I didn't need screams or scandal. I needed something quieter, something final. The kind of justice that doesn't shout, it lingers. As I watched my daughter sleep, fingers curled into a fist near her cheek, I leaned close and whispered her name again. Isla. A name given in love, protected in law, spoken in truth. She stirred, then settled. And in that moment, I knew the first name my daughter would learn would be mine. If this story speaks to you, hit that subscribe button, like, comment, and share this. Thank you.